Hi everybody. Today's video is not an audition, and it's not a monologue, and it's not Talks with DK. It's just me presenting my favorite recipe to friends, family, and whoever else wants to listen. Basically, I make a very different kind of spaghetti sauce and meatballs. And my friends love them because they've never had anything like them before. And I'm to the point now where I'm gonna kind of retire making them for other people because it can be a little costly and also time consuming. And I thought, what better way to help people out than to create a video where I can show you how to make them yourself. Because you know what? They're not that hard. They're just different. This recipe is actually for 2 pounds of meatballs. But because they are so time consuming to make, I would suggest you make as big a batch as you can fit into the biggest pan that you have, and then go ahead and put them in containers and freeze them. So, let's get started. This recipe that we're working with today is made for a 5-quart saucepan. If you have one that's non-stick, that's even better, because if you forget to stir it frequently, the sauce will burn and you'll end up having to throw out the entire pot. Your very first ingredient is 1 large onion. You're going to chop that onion into little pieces, and then you're going to take that and put it in your pan. The next ingredient you want is minced garlic, and you can mince it fresh yourself, or you can buy it already pre-minced for you in a jar. It works just as well and doesn't taste any different. You want to put in 4 tablespoons of this in with the onion in the pan. The next ingredient is extra virgin olive oil, and as you can see by the label on this bottle, I made a mistake and bought Mediterranean blend canola oil with virgin olive oil, and that is not what you want. You want just plain old extra virgin olive oil. You want to put 3 tablespoons of this into the mixture with your onions and your garlic. Now what you're going to do is you're going to mix this all up on medium heat and saute it until the onions are clear and the garlic starts to brown a little bit. And this is what it should look like. Now we're going to get ready to put in our tomatoes. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take 3 cans of tomato puree, not tomato sauce, tomato puree. Each can is 28 ounces. Just a note on the tomato puree, I used to always use either Progresso or Contadina. However, as you'll see in the video, I now use Kroger puree, which is the Ralph's store brand here in Southern California. They cost about half the price and they taste just as good. Also, for every 2 cans of puree that you use, you want to put in 1 can of water. So in this case, because we have 3 cans of puree, we're going to add 1.5 cans of water. Okay, so what you want to do now is just stir up all the ingredients, that garlic and the onions and the puree, all together with the water. And don't worry that it looks like it's going to fill the pan and you're wondering where are the meatballs going to go, because this is going to cook down. Next, you're going to add 1 tablespoon each of dried oregano, dried parsley, and dried basil. And again, you can use fresh ingredients if you'd like, but you probably would use more than a tablespoonful. And once again, we stir this into the sauce. And next you're gonna add a 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese, and yes, Kraft is perfectly fine for this purpose. You can use freshly grated Parmesan if you'd like, but if there's one thing Italians know how to do, it's to cook cheaply. And this is the last ingredient for the sauce. It is a 1/4 cup of sugar. What this does is it cuts all of the acidity in the sauce so that it doesn't cause agita. And it's what makes the sauce different and special. Now you've got everything in your sauce, so what you want to do now is you just want to cook it slowly for about an hour, stirring it about every 10 minutes and making sure that the heat's not too high. If it's bubbling and it's splattering all over the place, it's too high. This is what it should look like when it's boiling. It will still sometimes pop and cause a mess on your stove, but I try to just clean as I go, rather than trying to clean up the entire mess at the end of the project. Okay, this is your first ingredient for the meatballs. It's ground beef, and you can use whatever fat or lean percentage you want, but the higher the fat content, the tastier the meat. You're gonna put that package of hamburger in a bowl, and in this case, it's 2 pounds of hamburger. And you're gonna add 3 eggs to that mixture. I always use Progresso breadcrumbs, and I always use the Italian seasoned Progresso breadcrumbs. But for some reason, everywhere I went this week, they did not have the Italian ones. Instead, they have, I think, panko ones. So I bought the plain ones, and I'm gonna add my own Italian seasoning. But basically, for every pound of hamburger, you want to use a 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. So in this case, we're going to add a whole cup. I just added about a 1/2 tablespoonful of Italian seasoning. Again, because I couldn't find the Italian flavored breadcrumbs. And again, with the Kraft Parmesan cheese, you're going to use 1/3 of a cup of grated cheese to every pound of hamburger. So in this case, we're putting in 2/3 of a cup. And if you have any lumps, just make sure you break them up. Now that you have everything in the bowl, you mix it all together very, very thoroughly with your hands. This is not thoroughly mixed. It has to be completely thoroughly mixed in a consistency where you can roll a meatball. Basically, what you want to do is you want to mix it like dough. You're taking everything from the bottom of the bowl, bringing it up to the top and squishing it into the whole mixture, and you just keep doing that. As you can see by this video right now, these are still not ready to go. So here we are. This is what the mixture looks like, and we're going to get ready to put it into the sauce. And this is what makes these meatballs really special. A lot of Italian people and everyone else rolls their meatballs, and they either fry them first or they bake them in the oven and then they put them in the sauce. But that's not the way the Sicilians did it. Okay, so this is what a meatball looks like. I make them about the size of a golf ball. Realize that no matter what size you make them, they are going to grow in the sauce. So keep that in mind. So you can see how big this is in relationship to my hand. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just drop it slowly into the sauce. Also, make sure when you grab the hamburger that you squish it together so that it's nice and tight. There's not a lot of holes in it, and then you roll it so it's nice and smooth like this. And again, just carefully drop it in the sauce. Sometimes I make a smaller version of my meatballs, and these are for children. Most kids love my meatballs, and they especially like them when they're small like this. So you make them a little bit smaller than a ping pong ball, and they will grow a little bit, but they're smaller than the big ones that the adults eat. Okay, so now all your meatballs are in, and you're gonna stir, and as you can see, the pot is pretty full. But again, this sauce is gonna cook down, so don't worry about that. Just stir it gently when you stir it, and make sure you stir it about every 15 minutes and watch to make sure that it's not bubbling and splattering all over the place. So each pound of hamburger will yield you about 10 to 12 meatballs, depending on how big you roll them, and obviously more than that if you make mini meatballs. You also want to cook these meatballs and sauce for about 3 hours at a very low simmer like this, stirring about every 15 minutes. And if things start to splatter all over the place, turn the heat down. As the sauce continues to cook and the fat starts to come out of the meatballs, the quantity in the pan gets even higher. So if you need to, what you can do is take a ladle and scoop out some of the sauce and just put it in a bowl on the side. Continue to cook your meatballs, and then as the sauce cooks down, you can add that little bowl back in. Okay, so can you see how much the sauce has cooked down? And also you see how it's popping? And see the mess it's making? That means it's too high. But we're gonna take this bowl now and we're gonna pour it back into the pan. And now there's enough room for all of the sauce. We're going on 2 hours here, so an hour left to finish. Just a note on this recipe. When I was done cooking this pot, I actually added some Parmesan cheese, and I actually added more sugar because that's the way that I like it. You will learn what works for you with regard to the ingredients. What's important is the actual ingredients that I put in, as well as the way that I cook the meatballs. Also, maybe you don't eat red meat, but don't let that stop you. I used to live with someone that did not eat red meat, and for 6 years that I lived with him, or I should say he lived with me, I made my meatballs with ground turkey instead. The only difference is they require a little bit more seasoning and definitely some salt and pepper. I have never made my meatballs with ground pork, but I'm gonna guess that they might be kind of tasty too. So if you decide to give that a shot, give me a shout out. Let me know how you make out. And for those of you that love sausage, the way I was taught to make this, when putting in the onions and the garlic, instead of adding olive oil, what my parents taught me was to add Italian sausage, both hot and mild. And you would saute those together before adding the puree. Then when the sauce is done, you'll have both meatballs and sausage to serve your guests. The only thing is you're gonna need a bigger pan. And this is where you put the good Parmesan. And on your pasta too. So that's it. I hope you enjoy this training video and that you give it a shot yourself and see how you make out. I know of only 2 people that have made this sauce and meatballs, and they loved it. And of course, if you have any questions, you can hit me up. Mwah! Manja!